This miniature was primed with Vallejo's matte black primer followed by a zenithal spray of Liquitex white ink. I know the picture said no airbrush, and truly it's not needed as I base coat everything fully before adding highlights. The primer can be added by brush, and the ink was only added to help me better differentiate each of the details, as I'm old and my eyesight isn't the greatest anymore. In the interest of logic, something that typically eludes me, I sit down and plan out how I'll approach this miniature. If I were painting this off camera for myself, I would base coat everything and then begin adding highlights everywhere. This would be a more efficient use of time, especially if I'm glazing a lot, as you can work on one area while a previous one dries and then go back and forth between them. However, since I'm painting for the camera, that approach makes it a lot harder to follow along, so as in most of my videos, I'll do one section at a time. I decide on the blue sections first, followed by the leathers, flesh, eyes, gold parts, steel parts, hair, gemstones, and finally the base. To keep this video relatively short, I'll not be showing the hair, gemstones, and base, as those took the least amount of time and effort anyway. Specifically for the blue clothing and armor, I didn't do anything crazy, just the base coat, followed by 3 increasingly brighter highlights. Each new highlight was applied over several layers and covered increasingly less area. For the blue sections that were metal, specifically the helmet and the horse emblem on the shield, I added 2 additional highlights of an off-white and pure white to distinguish them as metals from the blue fabrics. The estimated time for me to paint all of the blue areas was about an hour and a half. For the leathers, I follow a similar approach as the blue fabrics. The highlights are done slightly different as I try to apply thin lines, and as I move to each brighter color, I try to make those lines even thinner, so that they give the appearance of worn creases or scratches. I also added one shadow color on the sides of the legs and scabbard wraps, and under the bracers. Altogether, the leather and wood work took me roughly 70 minutes. For the flesh, oddly enough, this has some of the smallest surface areas on the miniature, though I put a lot of colors into it for tinting and highlights, and glazing to help smooth some of the transitions between the colors. The eyes were also very difficult to paint on this miniature, due to them being recessed between sculpted eyelids and parts of the helmet. The flesh and eyes took about 45 minutes of effort. For the gold parts, I used a lot of the same colors from the flesh and leathers, but still managed to keep them looking like different materials. The gold I highlighted all the way up to an off-white and pure white to help sell the reflectiveness. The gold steps took nearly 3.5 hours and ended up being the most time I spent on any part of this miniature. I already knew I wanted a grayish white hair, so I didn't want to do grayscale for the steel area, so instead of adding white into the black, I added the lightest blue I used previously in this video. Doing so made the steel visibly different from the hair and furs as well as the blue clothing, but simultaneously allowed me to reuse colors that were already on my palette. For the blade, I used the same color as the armor, though all of these were thinned to glazes, save for the edge highlights. Then, I add the same off-white and pure white highlights I used on the gold armor. Altogether, the steely areas took me 2 hours, including the work on the blade. I finish up the hair, which took 90 minutes, the gems, which took another 30 minutes, and finally the base, which added a final 20 minutes. And this is where I decided to call it a night. Altogether, this project took me 11 hours. I like the colors I used in the gold and steel areas. I also like how the hair came out, though there is a horrid mold line going across the top that I missed, and it stands out painfully. The left eye came out well enough, but the right, not so much. I also forgot to add the snow microballoons to the base before the snow terrain dried. I can easily fix this by adding a thin layer of the snow terrain, and then applying the microballoons on top of it so that when it dries, the microballoons will be fixed in place. Doing so would change the look of the snow to the more soft powder look versus a melting slush. I had also left some blue showing from the base to give the hint of solid ice underneath, but I think I left too much visible. I wouldn't mind covering maybe another 30% of it with more snow. For lessons learned, I really need to figure out how and where to place highlights on metals. The trim for the gold looks good enough, and blue metals of the helmet and horse emblem look fine. The blade looks okay, though I should have done the glints as finer and brighter lines. But the gold on the shield and the sword hilt look especially bad. I need to start building a reference library of images for different things to get a better understanding of highlight placement and lighting, as well as start employing Zimikito's suggestion of taking a picture of the primed model. Combining these two approaches should be good starting foundations, and something I should have implemented long ago instead of trying to just wing it. And that'll bring this video to its end. I hope you learned something or inspired to start or expand your own collection. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, you can easily support the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until the next video.